today, which is from Carlos Santos, who's the head of products in Europe for KAON Broadband. His presentation is entitled Device Management for Households, New Trends in ACS Deployments, and very much looking at the perspective of where does the service delivery, service containerization sit, as well as a lot of the best approaches and new trends that you're seeing from a service provider perspective. Carlos, please, over to yourself.
Thank you, Craig. Just let me just set up here the sharing screen. So I think it's okay. So first of all, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think it's definitely a pleasure to join Broadband Forum in the vBASe events. Today, focus on the connected home and the best practices. Just a quick remark, Craig, because we had a change on the subject. So today we will be focusing on the service orchestration in one specific area related to the security. That is definitely something that we are seeing, from an OEM perspective, a major concern from our customers. So today we will definitely focus that. I just wanted to make that remark. Sorry for that. Said this, I will just kick off with a presentation. Before we go into the details of today's presentation, just a quick baseline, also because it's important that all the presentation that will be shared with all of this audience today is having an OEM perspective. Of course, things can change, the paradigm can change depending in which spectrum you look into it. However, please stay with me, and happy also to take additional Q&A questions. So from an holistic view, the way we are positioning here in the markets, right? So the end device, or the CPE, as you want to call it, we see it as the primary and interactive contact between the operator and the customer. So it's actually the entry points towards the in-home household connectivity. We are seeing the CPE driven by these open source needs aligned with all the standardization bodies. And in the previous sessions on the quarter review, we focus a lot on the work that we are doing with, for example, Broadband Forum, but also other standardization bodies across the domain. And this will, from our perspective, allowing the operator to control, of course, their own software roadmap and customer experience. Because at the end of the day, it's all about customer experience, right, left connectivity, everything sits into how the customer perceives this end device. We will touch some areas of it, but definitely today we will be focusing on the security part related to the service orchestration deployments. So exactly what we are doing, three main elements just to help us out into putting things in a perspective: open source platform and services ecosystem enablement on the universal CPE. We are definitely driving that strategy. We see major demand on it, and this is also the reason why Connected Home Forum is available today, right? To bring all the different angles into the perspective. Security, today we will be focusing on it. So verify, fortify, secure, and audit the complete container solution in order to address pretty much the concern of operators. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we have been seeing a race of enablement of third-party services, regardless if it's Wi-Fi management solutions, regardless if it's cybersecurity solutions, or even, optimization of quality of experience. But there is a central point that all the operators are now demanding is, how can you guarantee that what we are deploying in the CPEs on top of is actually secure and does not exploit security breaches, right? So that is pretty much how I will be focusing the presentation today. And the last point, which may sound in the beginning as an isolated item, but it's completely completely related to the security topic. So we are inside KAON Broadband, working very close with partners to move out from this concept of integration and repackaging. So we are not just taking updated drivers, updated software. We are going to the next level, and the next level is this optimization of kernel linked to the open source driver. So in a nutshell, this is pretty much our mission, the way we are seeing the in-home connectivity or the connected home experience. In terms of paradigm, and once again, it really depends how you see it, but there are two elements or two pillars that are in the center of what we are doing on the daily basis. The first one is the hardware. Again, the CPE or the end device that we all have at our homes as the center of the in-home connectivity. And here, three domains are very, very important. First of all, the hardware diversity. Well, not just on the type of technology that the CPE is using, but also in the enablement of certain types of connectivity, regardless if it's a Wi-Fi connectivity, IoT connectivity. So all of that is part of the concept on the hardware. Design, once again, the focusing on the customer experience. The design becomes more and more relevant into nowadays prepositions. Most of the operators, of course, looking from an OEM perspective, have their own IP language designs, but we are also making sure that our off-the-shelf products following what we call a futuristic design. And then the third element, environment friendly. And this becomes, once again, a very important topic, because and in the beginning we were discussing all of these climatic changes, right? So the footprint or the decrease of the carbon footprint is definitely a major KPI that operators are demanding, and we as an OEM need to follow that guidance. Not only how we build the CPEs, how we build the end devices, but also how the production sites are using all the elements to produce the end device. So that is, in a nutshell, how we are approaching the hardware or the better hardware configuration. And then linked, of course, once again, to the enablement of services, and here introducing the service orchestration. Once again, the connected home paradigm using what has been standardized or is being standardized when it comes to USP, agent and controller integration, fully end-to-end logic talking into a standard mode. So that is definitely one of the areas we are very focused, and introducing here the concept of the lifecycle management or the remote management to support all of this deployment and enablement of services, while at the same time with the containerization, we allow these multiple services to be managed in the controlled way. And now entering once again to the connected home paradigm. Of course, all of these sounds in a practical term, being honest and transparent, quite straightforward, but it opens some areas of discussions or some problems, if you want, right? So it can lead to undetected interoperability issues, can lead to integrity risks, and also can lead to vulnerable components, right? So I mean, I always say that one thing, and most of the times we need to have this into consideration. One thing is when you run services that are isolated in the control environments. Other thing is when you start deploying all of those services close to each other, when they consume the same resources from the same host CPE, and most of the time also use the same data path. So there are some problems behind that need to be taken into consideration. As a result, of course, this can lead to identify threats, because sometimes what is secure in one environment may not be secured in a completely different environments. Can lead to stability and performance issues, and this is one of the key areas that are concerning operators when it comes to the service deployments, unknown behaviors, which could lead eventually to CPE crashes, and once again, linking all to the customer experience will definitely damage how customers perceive the service, right? So that is why we are bringing here today the discussion around, security and the containerization and how we can bring all of these together. So before we touch the security aspects, I just want to, put things once again into perspective. The right picture shows you actually, what we consider to be the end-to-end flow when it comes to the service orchestration, right? The CPE as the central piece, working with what we call a controller that pretty much controls everything happening on the CPE side. You can call it a little bit close to a virtualization of services, right? So we truly believe that the deployment of services into Linux containers is a logical choice, for safe deployment, and also a way to unlock this platform or cloud approach. So we are seeing today a shift from operators not having or containing all the information on the end device, but trying to virtualize as much as possible some of the logic into the clouds. Such services, as you may understand, they need to be managed, right, inside the container. They need to be provisioned, they need to be updated, and if necessary, removed, right? So that's why lifecycle management here as a concept addresses very well all of these needs, right? So the need to deploy devices in the real time, and if necessary, feed data for a decision-making controllers, right? Most of the times driven by AI agents, but it can also be, driven by local data on the CPE. So that's where we see all of these orchestration linked to the data enablement of TR-369 becoming into play. So talking about security, right? So two aspects that are in the back of our minds. First one is, what kind of security does lifecycle management with the containerization provides? And how do we ensure that we are securing this service orchestration system? So the baseline principles are in these slides. Of course, we don't have the answer for all of that, but we can at least step by step working together as a community to address that. So on the point number one, right? So how does LCM with LXC provides? Pretty much we are focusing in three elements: isolated environments for services and their service stack. What does it mean? It means that one container cannot talk with the other container. We don't provide privilege modes for the services to run. We keep this consistency, this behavior consistency over multiple devices, which means that there are no exceptions between what is happening inside each one of these containers. And we work towards a distributed and microservice architecture. We truly believe that this is the way to break, local dependencies and local links, and addresses the way how lifecycle management orchestrates each one of these individual containers, which, as you know, are or can be services. So how do we secure this service orchestration, right? So we are pushing, and we have been having several discussions in other working groups for user segregation. So we truly believe that this will make sure that things become more secure. Container certification, and this is linked to trusted source, right? So the moment we are working with a third party, and that third party provides us a trusted source, we know that that solution is already secure. So we don't need to run specific audits on it, and we can just safely deploy it into the CPEs or into the service orchestration, and then, of course, operators or customers can just use it. And we do not allow users to create their own containers or deleting. So all the logic, all the orchestration logic still remains on the cloud side, and most of the times on the operator responsibility. So these are the baseline principles for the lifecycle management. And what we have been doing, pretty much a work that we have started recently, is to introduce this ecosystem overview analysis that pretty much sits in 5 steps, right? The first one is verify the SBOM, pretty much run a deep software analysis, inspect every application, and guarantee the integrity of that validation per container. We fortify and we make sure that we do continuous software monitoring, malware detection, anomaly detections, and we also make sure that we define resources allocation. And this is very important specifically for operators, because what we believe at the end of the day we want to avoid is you have one service running on the host CPE and you deploy a second service, and that second service will disrupt the initial service that was working, without flaws. So we need to define those KPIs, which can be static definitions or dynamic definitions. Everything can be controlled also from a controller point of view. Secure sensitive data. Once again, other concern around how data flows or data paths are inspected, what is the data flows, how do you make sure that each software components are secure. So we are definitely looking into the areas of, specifically when we touch cybersecurity services linked to DPIs. So all of that will bring the topic of secure sensitive data, and we are making sure that the solutions that we put out there are addressing that. And of course, audit the end-to-end software, right? So we're making sure that we protect IPs, because at the end of the day, you taking the role of a system integrator and partnership with third-party service enablers, you need to make sure that their IPs are protected. So there is no middle game here. We need to maintain that privacy and also maintain user privacy. And of course, looking to this big arrow where we split in different domains, the idea or the concept we want to bring here as a solution is a fully automated validation, right? So we want the deployments of these services to be fast. We don't want this to take 6 months before we have a service up and running. So I usually say a little bit out loud that every environment is as secure as its weakest link, right? So that means that outdated software components with known public vulnerabilities create easily exploitable opportunities, right? So when components are not implementing vulnerability mitigations techniques against defects, that will be identified in the future. For sure, there will be a risk of active malicious exploitations, and this could rise exponentially. That is why also, if you remember on the beginning of the presentation, one of the points that we are working as a solution towards the security of the containers is linked to the kernel upgrades, making sure we are always using the latest and updated versions to control exactly the way the information flows inside these segregated containers. Just to finalize, and once again, we don't have too much time to go into the deep, and I look forward also for the questions from the audience. The way forward is, the way we see it, is definitely a handshake. I think we need to work as one, a handshake between even different device vendors. Yeah, we need to align the architecture of our CPEs when it comes specifically into related to the software part. But that handshake needs also to be aligned with third-party services, the enablers of those services, and what we believe to be the references related to standard bodies. And Broadband Forum today is one of those standard bodies that everyone relies on for this handshake. So hopefully, towards the vision that makes the industrial rollout a reality. From an architecture point of view, as I mentioned, open standards, open software, interoperability is definitely key KPIs that we need to take into consideration. And from an execution point of view, making sure that the software is enabled, is modular, it's containerized, and above everything secure. So at the end of the day, we all want the same, right? So reduce time to markets, lower OPEX, reduce CAPEX for our customers, reduce firmware and software complexity. So all of these are criteria that we are taking into consideration when it comes to the secure containerization. And with this, once again, I finished my presentation, and I thank you for listening to us today, and open now for questions.